Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat, and I am your host, and I'm so excited to welcome you to another week on the podcast. If you are new here, welcome. And if you're coming back after being here for a while, welcome back. If you've been here for a while and you've been a part of the community, you will know that I have not had a guest on my podcast in over a year. The reason for that is because last year in 2023, I went through change after change after change. I feel like I couldn't stop changing. There was so much change in my life. I had surgery, and then I moved from California to Colorado, and then we lived out of Airbnbs, and then finally we settled in Colorado in a home, and it's just literally been that energy in 2023. And the energy of 2024 is presence, clarity, and peace. And I'm just loving it. And I get my own space where I get to record. And so now I have the time, the energy, and the space to have people on the podcast to share more really valuable insight with you, not only about family constellation therapy, but many other topics as well. I just love to talk about FCT, so that's the majority of what this podcast is about. But this week, I'm so honored and excited to introduce you to my friend Margo, and she's also my neighbor. And it was a really vulnerable episode, you guys. Like, she really gets into her authentic experience in stepping into spirituality and how our friendship helped kind of solidify some of the things she was going through spiritually. She felt like she didn't really have anyone to kind of put meaning or explanation to the things that she was feeling. So that kind of is what sparked our friendship, walks around the lake and just kind of talking about this stuff. And then it kind of turned into this whole friendship. Now we're really good friends. And it honestly, she says this in the podcast, but it does feel like we are having a sleepover all the time, because it's like, oh, my friend's like next door. Like, just fun to like live next door to somebody that you really love and enjoy. And when I posted on my Instagram stories a couple weeks ago that I was looking for either past or current clients to come on the podcast and talk to me about their experience with FCT, she was the first person that responded. And I was like, yeah, just come over and we'll just hang out in my office and chat. So that's really what today's episode is. We're literally just hanging out in my office and chatting about her experience with it. And I do think that a part of her, really was open to FCT because of our friendship. But I do ask her in the podcast to talk about what was happening in her world around the time that we met that was even more of a driver for like really leaning into trying it. And she talks a lot about that. She talks about her experience leaving her crazy corporate job that was just plaguing her with mental and physical illness, and how she left that in order to take care of herself and their effort in starting a family and all these wonderful things that I think so many working women are going to relate to. If you're somebody that works in the corporate world or is familiar with the corporate world, you're really going to resonate with her story. And then obviously we get into what it was like for her to be an FCT. And I really am enjoying, I have a couple more interviews coming out in the next few weeks of other people who have offered to come on and talk about their experience with it. And the reason I'm doing this is because for most people, family constellation therapy is new. Like, a lot of people don't know what it is. It was modernized by Bert Hellinger in Germany, in Europe, less than 100 years ago. So it's still making its way to the US in popularity. It's really been kind of challenging to be able to educate people on what this work is. So why not have people come and talk vulnerably and authentically about their experience? And if you're somebody who's been skeptical but following my work, like, hopefully there's something in this will resonate with you. And if not, maybe it's just helpful information for you on your journey. Either way, it's always in service to you. I just love what I do and I love sharing it. So with that, let's get into this week's episode. I am excited to introduce you to my friend and neighbor, Margo. And I hope you guys enjoy it. And don't forget to rate, subscribe, and review the podcast on whatever channel or medium that you are listening to, whether it's Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Once a month, I am giving away a free constellation therapy session to somebody who subscribes, rates, and reviews the podcast, screenshots all three, and sends it to me either via email or on Instagram. You can find all of the handles and the links in the show notes below. So enjoy the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited.
It's so fun.
So let's tell the audience how we know each other. How did we meet?
So back in October of 2023, you moved in next door to me and my husband's house. And we were so excited because when we saw you and Tyler, we were like, yay, people our age. We're super, super excited. So we came over and said hello. And it took a while for us to like hang out as a group for like the first time. But once you and I connected, it felt like we'd known each other our whole life. So we live next to each other. That's how we know each other.
Yes, and we started going on walks together. And I think you mentioned when we first started going on walks around the lake together next to our house that you were looking for spirituality in some sense in your life, but you weren't sure where to go. Tell us paint a picture for us, like the story of what started to like pull us together in this relationship, because it was really unique and interesting, and it did feel like we've literally known each other forever.
Totally. It's such a good question because I was never really like spiritual, I think, as the world would call it or like describe. And I never really subscribed to sort of like, let's just call it what things I would maybe have referred to a few years ago as very like woo-woo. And I was like, that's interesting, but it doesn't like really spark a chord with me, and I don't really resonate with it, and I'm not really sure. And I think that's been my nature my whole life, is to be very questioning of things. My mom said when I was really young, I like was very questioning of Santa Claus, like even as like a little 3 and 4-year-old, like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like a guy's coming into our house in the middle of the night and like we're doing this whole song and dance. And then same thing with church. Not that my family's not very religious at all, but we did go to church as children, and my mom put us through Sunday school. And I'm the youngest of 3, I have 2 older brothers. And she said, like me was definitely, I was the most kind of questioning of like, really, what is this? And like, okay, are we really sure? And so I was just questioning a lot. So I think that's part of my nature is to be sort of questioning. And I think that's because of like, I'm self-protecting and I definitely am careful to trust. And I think that expands into why I was not really subscribed to like spirituality. 2023 was a really big year for me personally. In the professional sense, I had left 2 very big corporate jobs, which was crazy. I left the job that I'd been doing for 5.5 years and I was very good at, and I was rising the ranks to go chase another corporate job with a larger price tag. And I did that for 6 months, and then I burned me out to the ground. And so I left. And so I think there was just this part of me, and there was really beautiful timing of you coming into my life where it was like, wow, she does this work and this is like really meaningful. And for some reason, it just started to strike a larger chord with me. You also make it so safe and approachable and understanding. You don't feel like when you picture someone, I picture like one of the professors in Harry Potter who has like the crazy eye and she like goes around like with like her little purple globe. That's who I picture when like, had you told me what FCT was like over the phone, and I'd been like, sure, okay, I'll like hard pass.
Yeah.
But like seeing you and you talking about it and like the confidence that you carry in it, and then some of the things that you shared with me, and then some of the things that I started to see in the world as a part of that, or in my world, I was like, oh wow, I feel like there's really something here. I started to really think about like, when I met you, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. It's kind of like a scale question a little bit. There's enough people that are in this world of work. There's got to be something to it. It's a little bit of that I was like, there's got to be something here. There's enough people who have like a literal career in this, and whatever, whether it's spirituality, mediumship, FCT, manifestation, the world of what kind of this is all sort of embodying. It kind of gives it this like really big check mark of credit of like, okay, there literally can't be this many people around the world all singing the same song who don't know each other. Yeah. So that's kind of my relationships with spirituality before, and then as I met you, and then I kind of like was more welcome to it.
I love that. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And also your decision to leave your job too. I want to touch on that.
Yeah.
What was that fueled by? Tell me what you were going through in that time. It sounds like you had a path to great success. That's a huge, courageous, and really vulnerable decision to just like stop that path altogether. So tell me about that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, even today, I have like I almost can't believe that I did it. I'm like, wow. I was doing the corporate track of investment banking, management consulting, private equity. You're kind of hitting all of the marks on what society would subscribe as successful and what you should be doing, and man or woman nowadays. I think in the most recent job that I had, which was in private equity, where I was leading a division, and I had this big price tag on the job, which is kind of hilarious how we're all very attracted to novelty, and then those things start to like become less novel very quickly if it's actually not suited for you. I was at a crossroads, and it was so obvious. Everything in my life was showing me like, you need to take either a step in further and you need to dive in, or you completely need to dive out of this. And every bone in my body was like, you should not be doing this. You should not be here. I had just the craziest dreams when I slept, which I was rarely sleeping. I mean, the physical manifestations of stress were wild. I mean, I had a really stressful job before, what you would call a high stress job. This was like unlike I'd ever experienced before. And I had, I wasn't sleeping very well. I definitely, like, my digestion was really off. I was having like really intense allergies to foods, which I've struggled with my whole life. And what I'm realizing is that there's like such a correlation with stress, because inflammation, and then I'm like more quickly allergic to whatever those foods are. So very, very allergic to like the foods that I've kind of always been sensitive to. And then physically on my face, like I had eczema all over my face, all over my eyes. I'd never had that in my life before. And so I think there were just so many signs that were like, on the internal voice was like, you don't need to do what the world says you need to do to be happy. You can be happy and be successful in a very, very different orbit and venture, whatever that may be. And I still don't know what that is. And it doesn't have to be prescribed by the rest of society. And I think I've just always been the should person. Like, I've done the whole path kind of to a T. And I'm very good at that because I'm very good at people, and I'm very good politically. And so I think there's like this thrive of like, I'm beating all my peer group. I'm like, I'm managing people that are older than me, and like those kinds of things give you this sort of thrill. But at the end of the day, I started to really ask myself, like, on my deathbed, as dark as that sounds, like, is someone going to be like, wow, she was just like so good at being a consultant and like really good at private equity and really good at whatever it is? That's not it. And so the internal voice coupled with the external, like physical manifestations of just extreme stress. I mean, Blake, my husband, was like, had never seen me so stressed in my life, was literally asking me to quit the job. He was like, that I don't care what, like, how much money you're making. This is not worth it. So, on a Thursday morning, I had a conversation with the CEO, and I just was like, I can't do this. And I think they had sort of seen the writing on the wall. We had very fundamentally different approaches to, I think, running a business, and specifically running my division that I was supposed to be owning. And so we had a mutual agreement, and I walked away, and I felt the happiest I'd ever felt in that 6-month time frame in that moment. I mean, I felt thousands of pounds come off of my chest, my back. I felt so much better. I mean, I definitely was I still have the eczema all over my face and all this like craziness, but I was like, wow, I did it, and I can do it. And I think there's so many people that feel shackled to corporate world, and this isn't, I realize, not the conversation that we're supposed to be talking about. It's okay. But then it's like, oh my gosh, like, no, I'm in control. And I think that was really, really powerful and really cool. I've never taken time to think about really what Margo wanted to do. And it was sort of what everyone else wanted me to do.
Was family in that category?
Yeah.
Like, did you come from a family that valued worthiness and success and money and all these things?
Definitely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's part of like the culture, especially on my maternal side, very much the culture of my family of like doing very well in business, and like your worth very much attached to like the title that you have and sort of the business acumen that you have. And I've always had that as a very young child. I'm one of the youngest cousins out of like a very, very large family. So I got to watch and learn and kind of see and like grow up into be like in a little bit more of an excelled pace. And you're also growing up like going to cocktail parties and talking to adults. So like literally that I was built for this, like literally built to go into any room and talk to all these business people, men, women, whatever, and sort of make it personal and feel fun and feel light. And now all of a sudden I'm like really starting to excel in my work. So it felt sort of cohesive. Like my graduation and career also felt like I was getting so much family validation out of it. My grandmother, and who is the most amazing person, I respect her a lot, but she on my 16th birthday asked me if I was still on track to be a CEO or a senator. And so that is like the level of kind of drive in order to achieve their love, even though I do know deep down and like rationally you're like, I know my family loves me, but in this emotional state you're like, no, I really feel like if I do this, I'm going to be like the best and everyone's going to love me and everyone's going to be really happy and it's going to be all great and approve of me and this is going to be wonderful. And so definitely driven familially. My parents were really wonderfully supportive and very much agreed like you need to take a step back, because I think when they saw me, they were like, I mean, they think they would catch their breath of like, whoa, she does not look okay. It's kind of like a robot who's just like going through this crazy routine. We're like getting up at 4:30, going to sleep at whatever, hours at night. You're responding to emails, doing all this stuff until decks for days, Excel just until like 11 p.m. There were so many Tuesday nights where I was in full tears and Blake is like, you got to quit your job. Like, this is so not worth it. This is not what life's about. So I think to kind of like go back to the initial question, I had just a really, for lack of a better term, come to Jesus moment that was like, is this what this is supposed to be about? Mm-hmm. Like you get every day once and tomorrow is not guaranteed. So do I want to be waking up with eczema on my face and feeling stressed out of my mind constantly
and missing out on the joy of life
I mean, I had not really, I think my nervous system was in fight or flight for literally a decade. And so it's taken a long time to be really come down, and it's taken a lot. I mean, it feels like a full-time job right now, just like calming my nervous system.
Just to be like, okay.
Yeah. Just to be okay. Yeah. So, and then the other piece of the puzzle too was, we're really thinking about family planning and trying to have a family, and that environment was not conducive to, like, I just knew in my core that I was not going to have a successful, like, family planning, family growth, plan, I guess, so to say, if I kept doing that career. Mm-hmm. And I hate that a little bit because it's like, oh, wow. So here's another story where the female had to like let go of her career to have the family. And it's not to say I could have kept working. Maybe I just could have pivoted. I chose to fully step back and really regroup on a lot of things that started to really open my mind of like, oh, there's a lot that's in disarray here. Not just like physical, I have eczema on my face, let's just get that fixed. All of a sudden, every level I dug, I was like, oh, we've got stuff to work through here.
Thanks for sharing, because I think so many people are going to relate to that. I think that your vulnerability will speak volumes to people. So you obviously heard about Family Constellation Therapy through me.
Yes.
You kind of touched on this a little bit with like the family planning and the job, but what was it specifically about hearing about Family Constellation Therapy that really started to speak to you, that you thought maybe there's something here for me? And how did you connect it to those points in your life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, I had truly no idea what it was until you explained it to me. And still to this day, I call it FTC. I think that what really originally drew me to FCT was, one was like learning about what you do as a career. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, this is like so fascinating. I mean, me and Blake, when we went home, just like 100 yards away from here, feels like we're having a sleepover every night.
I know, literally.
We talked about it. We were like, this is really interesting. Yeah. And you were so, again, which is like such like a preconceived notion and potentially judgmental of me to have this like, oh, I thought someone who would have done this, like they wouldn't look like you or talk like you or dress like you. And so I was like, this is so interesting. Like this girl, she feels like me, but she's like doing this really interesting work. I think a couple of things that really drew me towards the work that you're doing specifically was, one, you talked about maternal relationships and like the generational emotions that can be held on for like several generations. And while I have a really wonderful relationship with my mom, and I had a really wonderful relationship with my namesake, my grandmother, the immediate reaction to you saying like, yeah, there's sometimes the maternal lineage has really like hard walls emotionally, and maybe they aren't the most loving people you've ever seen like exude love or joy or whatever emotion is in the world, specifically with like you, their daughter. That could not be more true. It is wild to me that I don't think I ever like really put, I guess, two and two together, or saw the sequential emotional pathway that was like, oh wow, my great grandmother was also like this. And I know that about her. She was very emotionally cold and very standoffish. And I think, with each generation it got like a little bit warmer, and my mom did like miles, and I'm so proud of the work that she's done over her life, because wow. But it's like the mother-daughter relationship, not a cakewalk probably for anyone. We obviously only know our own stories, but that really resonated with me, and very much was like, I know that there's something here that I could probably dig into, and things that I am doing on a day-to-day basis, whether it's the way that I'm like protecting myself, or even just operating or emotionally available to myself, others, my friendships, that are clear examples as to the relationships and the emotional walls that have been built up in my maternal line, I guess.
So you saw those walls happening in your life. And so what did that look like for you with those walls?
Yeah. I think I just was very cognizant that I had what I used to call a superpower of like, I could just put up a brick wall in 2 seconds of emotions and just hide everything and shove everything down. And I was very good at it. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason also why I think I excelled in very male dominant professions is because I was very good at just hiding that. I could like be one with the guys very quickly. I could turn off my feminine pretty fast, but still I didn't mind like still looking feminine and showing up feminine. I always had like the hot pink suit or like whatever, but that was my feminine. And then but I was like the masculine in work and the masculine in business. And if the guys even like wanted to, make jokes, maybe that weren't snide at me, but like were underneath it all sort of sexual, I could joke along and like play along with it, because I could really quickly turn it off, and it didn't bother me in the slightest, because it just is like this wall that I was really, so that was always something that I've been, even as a young age, and I have friends who have been friends with since I was 4 years old and still very good friends today. And they are like, it's wild how quickly you were so good at just protecting yourself. And I think it was a protection mechanism for myself, for my own mom, for my grandmother, for my great grandmother, because you're protecting from something. Mm-hmm. Like there's a reason why you're really quick to build up that wall. Mm-hmm. And so when you spoke about that lightly in some experiences that you had shared of some of the work that you've done with other clients or maybe yourself, it just resonated so much. I was like, okay, there's something here, because I'm really good. I'm that person too. Like I'm really good at putting up the wall. Yeah. So that was kind of one piece. And then the second piece that really drew me to FCT was, we are really on this fertility journey. And you started talking about, you mentioned the word spirit baby, which I had never heard in my entire life, but I was like, I'm sorry, what? And there's this, because we've been like, but the reality is,
you guys, Margot's like is so low-key funny. Every time I'm with her, I'm literally dying laughing.
It's funny because I like don't know anything about all this stuff, and then people are like, they've spent their whole careers on spirit babies, and I've realized now that there's like books written on spirit. I'm like, oh wow, okay, this is like a real concrete idea. We're on our fertility journey, and so it's a little bit of like, there was that glimmer of hope, the fact that you could sort of translate a little bit of sort of what was maybe going on in Blake and I's paths in relation to that, and it sort of just dissolves a lot of the what's going on with my body, what's wrong with me, why is this not happening? Like I've been perfect at everything else in my life. So how come we're not getting pregnant the second that I want to get pregnant?
And perfectionism is a great protection mechanism.
Yeah. Like cleanliness, perfectionism. I mean, you write a description of perfectionism in a dictionary and that's literally me.
Your face is like,
I'm like, hi, welcome.
But it's so great because it protects us from being wrong. It protects us from feeling not good enough.
Yeah.
It really does. It's a great protection mechanism. That and denial are some of my favorite brain protection mechanisms that we create for ourselves. Yeah, definitely. So you're saying that it was like, okay, there's this ancestral piece that's really interesting that I'm resonating with. And also there's this thing that I want to manifest in my life. And you were finding struggle with it. Mm-hmm. And whatever we were talking about, there was kind of this like, oh, maybe there's a possibility that there's an answer.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely.
So we did 2 sessions together. Yeah. The first one, I want you to take me through specifically the first one. We can touch on the second one because I think if you want, the second one was like, holy shit. Yeah. Like the second one was like, oh, this is actually, okay, this is actually happening. It was wild. But the first one, take me through your feelings right before the FCT. Like what were the feelings and experiences you were having internally before our first time together? Because we just like booked it. It was just like, all right, let's just do it like next week.
Yeah, totally. I think a little bit in this scenario, ignorance was bliss because I didn't have time to like really think about, I didn't know like the process, the procedure, the methodology. I had no idea what it looked like. It felt like it like tasted like, I was like, all right, well, we'll just see what this is. And so I think that really benefited me not having an agenda going into it. Of course, I was very interested in, okay, there's this fertility stuff that I'm like really focused on, but let's just see what comes up because at the end of the day, it's family constellation therapy. And so, and those are things that are very interconnected. And you would sort of explain that there's with modalities like FCT, you can uncover a lot of ancestral trauma, maybe, or emotional things that you're carrying for someone else, like your parents, that are actually inhibiting your ability to actually create space for a baby physically, emotionally, spiritually. Mm-hmm. So I knew that they were all interconnected and kind of just went in blind. I mean, at the end of the day, and I told you this, I was like, I don't really have anything to lose here.
True.
This is, I know this isn't going to be a negative experience. I trusted you. You're the warmest, so sunshiny person. I was like, all right, well, this will be a really fun experience and something completely new. And what's kind of interesting, and I was thinking about this a little bit, is my grandmother, my mom's mom, was always such a big advocate of try something new, like never judge anything, never judge anyone. And so there are these things that I'm like, wow, I actually kind of give her a little bit of credit for me being so open to something like this, of like, sure, why not? Like, who cares? This is cool and me, and we'll just see where it goes. So, yes.
So I come over to your house. We go in your basement.
Yeah.
Her house is beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
She's an interior designer. She has a company called Parks and Pendleton with her friend Hannah. It's literally like no, seriously. But really I walk into her house. It's pristine. It's beautiful. Like we go into the basement. It's this like perfect scenario for an FCT. Lots of open space, comfy couch. Also, I thought was beautiful. You had that picture of your uncle who passed away. Yeah. So there was like family memorabilia like everywhere around, and I was like, oh, this is
cool,
perfect for today.
Yeah.
We sit on the couch. You have no clue what you're going into other than the very few things that I've told you and maybe some of the things that you've seen on my Instagram. I'm just curious, like paint a picture for the listener and like, what's it like to be in the hot seat per se of the FCT session in the beginning? Because the beginning is the intake. So I'm asking you a load of questions and it's kind of a little confronting, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think I am someone who's very much an open book, and I'm not... While I have definitely experienced shame with things in my family, I think I've just grown a lot in that, and I've been able to accept a lot of it and accept that everyone's just doing their best and like no one is trying to have malintent. And it's not like you were asking really probing or really insensitive questions at all. I mean, they were pretty surface level. You were just trying to get a grasp for everything, but it's very quickly you start to piece together as the client of like, oh, wow, there's then this and then that and then also this. And so then like I'm doing right now, it felt very tangential. When you would ask me a question, I would say, oh, and I remember this, and I remember this, because they all started to flow together. And I don't know if that's because it was the presence of you and the intention of the sessions, but the intake session was, or portion of the session was, one of the more, like, I was able to really reflect on a lot of things in a very quick manner.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh wow, there's some deep level things here that I'm kind of excited to hear what she has to say about, that I didn't necessarily connect even before the intake. So it's a lot of questions. You kind of go through like childhood to adult. So, and you obviously share what you only want to share. And I think for me, it was, well, I'm going to get the most out of this if I'm just like open kimono about the whole thing and just share all the pieces of it.
Yeah. So take me into the experience with the papers. I have a question around this. At what point in the session did you start to feel the power of the modality, like it was actually working through you? And I have a feeling for you it was through the papers.
Yeah. That was probably the most tangible thing for me, because I actually was feeling it and not just watching someone else feel something and say things.
Right.
You're looking at pieces of paper on the ground. I mean, they're literally Kat's taking them out of her notebook, ripping out of her notebook, and then setting them on the ground. I wrote numbers on them, as I understand everyone does, and you write your own numbers, and then you place them in the order that you think is most suitable for you, which also tells Kat something, which I was like, oh, that's lame, because of course I put it in a perfect little row, 1 to 5.
Loyalty, addiction, war trauma.
Yeah, like great. So definitely not a circle. Maybe next time I'll do a little heart or something. But those were things where I was just like, wow, this is really crazy, but also like, kind of like, what the hell? These are papers on the ground. Like, I'm like, where's this gonna go? Yeah. But I'm like, whatever. We're doing this. This is like fun. I'm just gonna like really lean in and not have logic show up. And you reminded me, you're like, just remember, this is like, you got to kind of put logic to the side for this really to feel like it's going to be doing something for you to be receptive to things.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. For you to know, if you are hearing this for the first time in FCT for the first time, I basically use an energy field. We call in your ancestors. And when we open this energy field, I ask spirit and my guides through FCT and the field to assign a piece of paper to a person, place, or thing. So, and then after that, you stand on the papers and you're literally channeling. You're like an energetic channel for your paper, mom's paper, dad's paper. And like I said, it's different every single time, but that's what we're talking about when she's saying I was standing on the papers.
So I get on the papers and it was wild. It was like I was experiencing really intense emotion really fast. And then I would get off of a paper and I would get onto another one and I would experience an entirely different emotion really fast. And it was like I was never on that paper, because it wasn't what I realized. It's like, it's not my emotions. I'm just feeling the emotions of the papers. And that was so crazy. I'm like, I'm literally standing on notebook paper on the ground and I'm like feeling the craziest things. And as someone who's really good at like pushing emotions down, I'm very, I can like monitor my emotions very well. And I can like tell when I'm getting emotional, and I can be very controlling of like, okay, well, like, let's just temper this or whatever. That was all like gone out the window. And I've never felt they were so fast. Within a second, I was like, whoa, now I'm like laughing of joy. Whereas before I was like choked up, feeling so sad. And it was within 10 seconds of each other. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So that's where I was like, I just thought it was really, really profound to feel that. And I obviously still can't like totally explain all of it, and nor probably will I ever be able to, because it's not something that my profession, but it's very powerful. And I think stepping off of the papers and after it, I was thinking, wow, everyone should go through this. This is so cool.
Being on the papers is my favorite part. So you got off the papers. We talked about everything.
My mom's paper and me were very connected. I remember that, which was very interesting. I think we did find, and you're rejogging my memory, we found like an extreme feeling of loyalty and like the family loyalty. And it's crazy. There are so many things I thought about just afterwards, not even related to the FCT session, but recognizing how loyal my mom's side of it. We are such a tight-knit group. Mm-hmm. And we are incredibly loyal to each other. And we also try to chameleon with each other, I think, a lot. And when someone isn't chameleoning, then it's like, what are you doing? Get in line a little bit. And that's kind of wild for me to, it was just a really, it was all laid out there for me, but you just did a really incredible job of synthesizing and demonstrating here's the why to that. So a little bit of a tangent there, but my mom and I's paper were really connected. Like anytime you had me stand on my paper and look at the other papers, like which one am I most connected to? It was my mom, and vice versa. My mom, when I was on my mom's paper, it was like me, was like her like closest connection. There's this really strong loyalty there. That can be to a fault of like you're trying to protect each other's emotions, so then you just like don't go into certain pathways of emotions, or maybe don't really showcase how you're trying to feel, or whatever that
your
is.
relationship gets stuck in a certain way of being, and that's maybe not best for you.
Yeah. And you just fall into patterns. And I find like I can see how quickly these things are generational, because it feeds, there are things that I'm like, oh, this is an exact carbon copy of my grandmother too, a little bit. So yeah, I think there was a little bit of that of like leaning into femininity was something that it wasn't like that was my like, oh, Kat, this is what I want to go into the session with. That's what we uncovered after doing the intake, which is the reason why you do this with someone because they can actually digest and understand, and then sort of help you guide into an intention that actually feels right and resonates. And that was the one, and it did really feel right. And I very much related to motherhood. And it was just starkly obvious that the masculine energy of my maternal ancestral lineage was like trained in me. And I had to start untraining that and start giving back things that actually weren't mine. And that was, that was like the healing statements were really pretty interesting to feel, because it was like, oh yeah, this all makes total sense to me. I've never put these two ideals together.
So basically, in total, like family constellation therapy, before you went into it, what I'm hearing you say is there were these pieces of your life that didn't really make sense of how they all fit together, but you knew that there was a struggle within each of them. And then you came to the session and we kind of took all those pieces and we put this picture together of like, this is maybe what's keeping you stuck in your life. This is maybe something that you're ready to like not carry for your family anymore. And then we gave it back in the healing statements. And when you did that, did you truly feel that you were giving it back?
Yeah. We did 2 healing statements, one with my mom and one with my dad. And I have very much played a role in my like nuclear family's relationship of kind of like the peace setter, and I was always the class clown and definitely leaned towards humor to diffuse and to kind of make sure like, okay, everyone's happy because now like we're all laughing, right? Like we're good, right? But the reality was that's obviously like not my role to take on, and I just had taken it on as a kid. But so with my mom, it was just a lot of like emotions I think she felt towards her mom that had actually I started feeling like I was holding entirely and almost felt responsible for. So that was pretty wild. I mean, it really felt like I was talking to her. It was pretty insane. And then with my dad, physically, we both felt at the same time there was like a tightness like right here, kind of like in your low sternum that definitely felt a little bit more like sad to give back and harder in some ways, even though it wasn't as like I would say of an intense healing statement.
The energy was different.
Yeah, the energy was different, and that one was harder because I physically was feeling it. And then when we were done, you were like, "Did you feel like I felt something right here?" And I was like, "Me too." Yeah. Like it was so. That was I think giving back things that you don't own emotionally is something that we're probably all subjected to in our families and the relationships that we have with our parents. And our parents are just doing the best that they can, but inherently they're passing these things along because they don't know any different. And so I think what's really cool is to see, wow, I can actually hand some of this back. And for anyone who's listening or watching and is like, look, I don't really believe in FCT, whatever, and you're not really thinking like, oh, the energy is really there. Even just the act of saying these things just out loud, even if it was just to a blank wall, is healing.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to believe in anything, and it's a really powerful experience.
I get a lot of people who say after the healing sessions, because I always check in, how was that for you? How did that feel? I always hear, you said the words I wish I could say.
Yeah.
And I'm channeling them. Like, I'm not sitting there consciously writing them down before. I'm just tap on your heart. We're going to move some energy. Yeah. Like, let's just see like what comes through. And it's always like, those are words that I really needed to say.
And so eloquently said, it was like perfect. Like, you guys can't even believe how perfect these statements are. And that's why I was like, I did turn around. I was like, did she write this? Because
she did actually do that.
This is crazy that you're saying this. Yeah. And then I realized it was like, oh no, you're channeling. Yeah. Whether it's whoever is like my mom and me and my dad and me. And so, yeah, it's pretty wild.
How do you see yourself implementing the things that you learned from Family Constellation Therapy into your life? And if you've already done so, can you share with us how?
I think like the true biggest gift that FCT gave me was when you are processing someone else's emotions as your own, you are never going to win, and you can separate those emotions and remove them, whether that's even just mentally taking them and putting them into a imaginary box and putting them to the side. Mm-hmm. If it's giving them back through healing statements, I think that has been the greatest discovery of it, specifically with my parents, because they have had, I would say, just not the easiest marriage. And I think I took on solving that for them. And so giving those things back, even at the age that I am now as a full adult, has been very freeing, and being very cognizant, even my parents or friends or other family members, of just realizing when someone's expressing an emotion, even though I want to help them so bad because I care for them so much and I love them so much, it's not mine to take. And so freeing yourself of that has been like truly the biggest gift and the biggest takeaway for me.
That's what loyalty is, when it looks like in the shadow sense of loyalty, where we're so loyal to our families that when we're kids, we love them so much. We think that by taking on the emotion that they're feeling through love is going to free them from it. Yeah. It actually doesn't do that at all. It just continues the cycle of whatever that emotion is. Totally. So it must have felt really freeing to just give that back. And do you find that certain things shifted in your life emotionally because of that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like I'm looking at people, specifically in my family, as people and as individuals versus as like rather than looking at them with all these emotions kind of tangled up between, because it is, you sort of look at these things and you're like, I just really want this for you. I want this for you and whatever. And you're like, you are just so caught up in it that you almost can't appreciate them as individuals because you're just so caught up in these emotions. And because they're not your emotions, it's kind of confusing and it gets frustrating. And I think maybe I would assume other people have experienced this within their families, nuclear or otherwise, of like, why do I feel so intensely about this? And like, why can't I just like let stuff go with this person? Because you're like, no, wait, it's because I've been holding on to all these things that really aren't mine. And so giving that back, that's been a really nice practice. I feel a lot lighter. I feel like I can approach things much more like person to person and just carry a little bit more empathy versus being like, whatever, you're fine. Like, look at our life. You have nothing to be sad about. So like, why are you sad? Or whatever the emotion is, and whoever, it's in relation to.
Did you find that there was like a theme of helplessness in your family?
Well, it's interesting. They're almost like, well, I can't really, this is how this was. And like, whether it's like, well, we always have just swept emotions and things under the rug. So we just keep doing that. And so like, I can't change it. And I think there's this like, to your point, like the hopelessness of like, well, this kind of, it just is what it is. So we're going to, and it's not to say everything is just like dark and really gloomy on, like people are happy and joyful and we have a lot of fun together, but there definitely is that theme of like, that's just how things were. And so I'm just not going to worry about it. And I'm just going to keep moving forward because it's them sort of saying like, well, I can't really change it. And so I'm not going to like waste my time thinking about it, when in reality, they probably are thinking about it and it's eating them alive.
On the same side of that coin, if you saw as a child your parents helpless to their chaos in the marriage, then you took on the belief that your parents are helpless, meaning you had to help them, which maybe gave you a false sense of power.
Yeah.
So in some way, that false sense of power turned into a positive sense of power because you are very powerful and you're badass and you have this like cycle breaker, beautiful energy, like truly, but also that helplessness.
Yes. Totally.
It could be like, oh, what just... that could stem from addiction, that could stem from the mother wound, all those things. So it's interesting how helplessness kind of just popped up while we're talking through this. But
you said it, as always, you said it 10 times better than I did, but that is, yes.
Well, every family system has us because most children, especially in bigger families, there's always one child who's parentified, meaning that they become the parent figure for their parents. Their parents can't uphold the parental role for some reason. And so it's usually connected to some kind of complex trauma or addiction. And so then the child will be like, well, my parents, this is super primal subconscious. My parent can't take care of themselves. I have to become the parent emotionally, physically, whatever it is. And so that creates a pattern of like, my parent is helpless. I have this false sense of power and I can like fix people. I'm the hero and whatever.
Yeah.
I struggled with that myself. I was very much with my mom, very parentified with my mom. My mom had these emotions that I felt like I don't want to see her suffer. I don't want to see her struggle. I need to fix her. And nothing I could do was ever good enough to fix her. But I always felt this is a helpless relationship. Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And it gave me a false sense of power in my life. So it's kind of that dichotomy. Yeah. If you could tell someone who was skeptical about FCT any advice, what would it be?
If you have any inkling of doing an FCT and even if you're not bought into the spirituality of it, or you're not really sure you believe in, an energy field, try it. And then you'll see for yourself. And if it resonates with you, awesome, great. And if you have a really profound experience, that's wonderful. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then that's okay too. And I do really think that even if you took the energy fields completely out of it and you still did these healing statements, you would still definitely get something out of it. So there's no time lost or time wasted. I also think it's a really good time for reflection and just understanding of some of the why do I operate this way and giving reason, which helps you kind of navigate, okay, well, maybe if that is a behavior that I don't want to have moving forward, being cognizant and just self-aware is the first step to really any growth. And so I think you have nothing to lose. So don't trust us, just try it.
Yeah, so just try it.
Try it. Having an unbiased person, even someone who I'm very good friends with you, and I've shared a lot about, just my life, just because we're friends with you, it still felt like you had a very unbiased view and sort of an approach to let me unpack this for you because you're trying to get there and I can see what you're saying or doing, or I can actually see here's 3 other things that maybe you didn't identify, but let me offer these up to you. And did these resonate with you? And 9 times out of 10, they did. So I think the unbiased view is just healing overall.
Yeah. Especially if you come in as a stranger.
Yeah.
That's like the wild ones.
Then you can just, you let it rip,
let it
just say anything.
Yeah. Literally.
Who cares?
Well, is there anything else that you want to chat about or wrap up the session or the chat with today?
I would just say that if you were to tell me a year ago that I would be sitting here doing a podcast about FCT, I would have laughed at you and anyone else. I would have been like, no way. So I think when the world brings you opportunities and shows you doors and you're slightly intrigued, open the door. You don't know what you're going to find. This is so fun.
All right, guys. So if you like today's episode, please comment below, review, subscribe, and share the episode. And remember, for the month of April, I'm giving away 1 free family constellation therapy session to somebody who subscribes, rates, and reviews, and then sends me the proof that you've done it, either on Instagram or email. You do not want to miss out on this opportunity. So make sure that you do that. I'll link all of the handles and everything below for Instagram and TikTok and all that. But anyways, thanks for being here and listening to my first in-person interview. And I think in like 5 years from now, we'll
look back and we'll laugh at this one probably.
Yeah. But thanks for
being here. Good job.
Thank you.
Bye.